Living in Central Virginia when the power goes out. What do you do when the lights go out? I can tell you, having lived here most of my life, the big things are not necessarily snow, but ice. If we get a lot of sleet or freezing rain and it ends up on the lines or the trees, usually what happens is you've got a tree branch or an entire tree coming down, hitting a line, causing a short, which pops the breaker, or those are the easy ones to fix, or it takes the line down, or even worse, will snap a pole, or more than one. I mean, that's kind of a level of severity there. Having lived here as long as I have, I've seen it all. So there's ice, occasionally snow if it's heavy enough and causes the same effect as ice on the branches will. That's one. Lightning strikes, kind of rare. Usually you see those in the really hot weather, summertime. Definitely not in the winter. And what else would cause it? If you get a lot of really heavy rain and it softens the ground and trees will fall over. And then this most recent one that we had was high wind. We've had a bunch of snowstorms this winter. Nothing that really stops movement. I mean, the roads get clear pretty quick, and Virginia's gotten a lot better about how they pre-treat the roads so that they just stay clear. I don't see snowplows as much. I just see the chemicals on the road, and it's some kind of liquid that they spray down, but it really, it's snow melt of some sort. In fact, I heard one time that they make it out of sugar beets. I don't know if that's true. I kind of doubt it, but and I haven't gotten out to sniff it, but whatever it is, it works well, and it's not as salty, although it will leave a residue, when you paint, you need to wash your car and all that sort of stuff. But hey, if it keeps the roads clear, I'll put up with a little extra car washing, trust me. So they'll spray that, and it'll keep the roads clear. Even when, out of an abundance of caution, the school system and other businesses will close down. Okay, I mean, let's face it, we've got the opportunity these days to work from home. So you got the internet, you can stay safe, you can stay warm, you can stay at home, work from there, which is great. I do that a lot. I love it. However, when the power goes out, you can't work from home. Not too well. I mean, can't do the computer, don't have lights, so when it gets dark, it is dark. But most recently we were out. This is kind of an extreme one because it's been a number of years since I've lost power for more than, say, 30 minutes or an hour. In this case, we were out for 24 hours, and it was a section of road between Orange and Gordonsville, I'd say half of Route 15. But there were trees that were taken down by very, very high winds that came in after a very heavy rainstorm. So we've got soft ground, roots are loosened, and now you've got these really high shrieking winds, which is most unusual. But it took down the tree, which hit the lines, crashed a pole, broke that off. I think there was either one or two poles involved. And, with all the other outages, ours was not an isolated incident. There were outages all over the place. Orange County, Greene County, some in Albemarle. Your local companies have to get in there. And they've got much better systems now. They're actually pretty automated. You call in, you say, I'm without power. And they want to know, want to confirm your address, want a phone number to call you back on to let you know when power is restored or to see if you've gotten it back, that sort of thing. So, as much as people want to fuss when the power does go out and how long is it going to be out and how long have I got to put up with this, they've got some really good systems for handling their customers, and then that gives the crews the opportunity to go out and what they need to do. In this case, like I said, we were out 24 hours, almost to the minute, and during that time, I don't have a backup generator. A lot of people do have them, and I'll talk about those more in a minute, but I don't. What I do have is a wood stove. I have lots of little AA batteries and flashlights. They love them, and I'm surprised at how long an LED flashlight will actually work with batteries. So we could get around and do things. We had heat, even though it was not as good as central air distributed system, but we had a wood stove. So we had heat, and believe it or not, we could cook on it. So the pioneer spirit comes out, and I could do scrambled eggs and bacon, and I have to say it tasted pretty good. Coffee was a little bit something, but instead of a drip coffee machine, you just heat the water up on the wood stove, and you pour that boiling water over top of the grounds and let it drip through, and the rest. So not the greatest coffee in the world, but Bad coffee is better than no coffee if you're a coffee drinker. So anyway, we got by for those 24 hours. And like I said, probably where I live right now, I can only remember this time and maybe 2 other times where we were without power for several hours. Okay, so how do people deal with it? If you're in town or if you're on one of the major routes, typically you don't lose power, or if you do, you get it back very quickly because those are closest to the distribution lines, the substations as they call them, and the things that will cut off power, like lines running through the trees, the woods, whatnot, or there are obstructions that'll get across them. I'm just glad we're not in Southern California where the humidity runs between 5 and 10%. Old lines, lots of wind. You saw what happened in California here recently, and that is a tragedy of epic proportions. We don't have to deal with that here in Virginia. Humidity is a lot higher, and we just don't have the conditions that they have out there. So this is an unusual occurrence, and like I said, I got by without any sort of backup. But a lot of people have either propane or diesel-fired generators, and they can be boxes. Some of them can run a whole house. Typically, those are 20 kilowatt units. If they're rated to put out that kind of power, they can pretty much run your entire house. Depends on your square footage and what equipment you're running, but you'll definitely keep warm. You'll have some lights. You can keep the refrigerator on, and you might have to cut back a little if you're running a heat pump for heat. Wintertime is the one that puts the most stress on everyone because it's cold and everybody wants to stay warm. So a lot of people have backup generators, especially if they're out in the rural areas and they are concerned that they might be without power for an extended period of time. For these things, you must have, though, fuel supply. So it's either a propane tank, liquid propane, because we don't have natural gas once you get outside of the towns and cities. Okay, we don't have it piped to the house. You would have a tank, and you have a provider that comes out and refills that. Anywhere from 125 gallons up to as much as a 500-gallon tank. That's above ground. And then if you want buried tanks, those go underground, and they can be as much as 500 to 1,000 gallons. In fact, I saw one horse farm down in, I think it was Fluvanna County, had 3,000-gallon propane tanks buried. It was a rather large house. They had a much bigger generator, but it was the sort of thing where they could run for days on the propane in the tanks. They also cooked with it, but I got to tell you, you can cook a lot of steaks on the gas oven in the gas range before you run out of gas. So if you heat with it or if you run your backup generator, they had what I considered a more than adequate supply. The other thing that intrigues me, mainly because of my engineering background or because it's fairly new stuff comparatively speaking, is a solar system that is designed to be backup. Most of your solar systems work in conjunction with the grid or the connection to the power company. And a lot of people like to think of the power company as the battery, because while your solar cells are generating power, that's offsetting what your house is consuming, and you may even be putting power back into the grid rather than taking it out of the grid. So that's where, as long as the grid is working, in other words, there's power house, then you can offset your use with what's being generated by the solar cells. But once the grid goes down, that solar system doesn't work. Okay? I had a hard time wrapping my head around that when I first heard it. I said, what are you telling me? The sun's out, the panels are producing electricity, I've got an inverter which is changing it, to usable alternating current for my house. Why can't? Okay, it doesn't work that way. There are off-grid systems where you have batteries. You have a bank of batteries, and all that the solar cells do is power those batteries. They charge those batteries, and then the batteries smooth things out, because as long as there's some charge there, they will run the household for you. Now, you run your house at night and they're not being charged, so they're being drained. Okay, got it. But as soon as the sun comes back out, they get recharged. That's an off-grid system. A hybrid system with battery backup is you've got your solar cells, you've got your batteries, which get charged when the house is not consuming everything, and you have the grid going. So the batteries are there for when they're needed, kind of like your backup diesel or propane-powered backup generator. and instead you've got the batteries. They run through an inverter, which provides the AC. So your grid or the power company can be going down. You have no electricity coming from them, and the system is smart enough to just disconnect from there and switch over to the batteries and run your house. And those systems are so darn fast with a switchover. I've had some people tell me, this is anecdotally, but I've had a lot of people tell me that they would be working at their computer. They might see or hear a little bit of flicker in the lights or something, but the computer keeps going. They're still working and everything goes as before. They're now on battery power and they don't even know that they've lost it. Okay? So that is kind of like the ultimate, the latest, most high-tech, newest tech anyway for doing that. I don't know too many people that have those hybrid systems. I did tour a house one time though. I was a neighbor of one of my listings, and I just happened to see their solar panels in the backyard, and I went and knocked on the door and said, explain what you've got here, explain your system to me. And it was one of those. So that they don't have to worry as long as the batteries are charged and the sun comes out. And the thing to remember is you will not have a whole lot, you will have very little light during a rainstorm or a snowstorm or any sort of weather like that. But oddly enough, there's enough that comes through the clouds that you'll get some charge from that. And usually those big storms, they pass in a day or two at the most, and then the sun is back out really bright. So those cells are working, they're charging up the batteries, and they're keeping the household going. I'm not going to get into the design principles of that. There are people who do that and will sell you these systems. But if you like being green and don't want to burn excess hydrocarbons to generate your emergency power, that is something you could consider. I've certainly looked into it, and maybe one of these days it might take the wood stove out of my hands. All right, let me wrap up with who serves the area, the power companies that provide us electricity. Virginia is a state where electric power is regulated. So your main provider is a company called Dominion Energy. At one time they were known as Virginia Power, or Virginia Electric and Power Company even before that. But they're a regulated utility. They're allowed to make up, the state legislature says what that can be at any sort of increases. So we're not totally unregulated in Virginia, and while electric costs have gone up over the years, and I've seen it in my bill, but it's not been wild spikes. And I have to say that Dominion, since I'm one of their customers, they've been pretty good about keeping the lights turned on, keeping the power going, and responding fairly quickly. They have crews that go out whenever we have outages. They'll go out and do the work to get people back on fairly quickly. And if need be, they contact other power companies, ones from even out of state. I mean, this is the sort of thing where they want to get you back on quickly, and they do a good job of it. Other power companies, providers in the Central Virginia area, we have Central Virginia Electric Co-op, which if you're a client of theirs, in other words, you get your power from them, you're also a part owner of the company. It is a cooperative, and you'll get a little bit of a dividend check at the end of the year. So that's how their profit is done. Their profit is distributed. And then the other one is Rappahannock Electric. That covers parts of Louisa County, a little bit in Orange. Definitely covers, I don't know if they cover Greene, but definitely Madison and Culpeper County. And then further south and east, like Albemarle, Nelson County, and Fluvanna County, you'll see more of Central Virginia Electric Co-op. These are in the area. But those are the ones that you deal with. And again, they're regulated. I said regulated monopoly earlier. Monopoly in the sense that Dominion Energy is also a provider or a generator of electric power. So they will sell to the co-ops. And again, whatever the business arrangements are, they make it work. But again, whether you're a client of Dominion, EVEC, or REC, they all work well together to keep the lights on. And yes, it is a nuisance when the power goes out, especially when things are dark, you don't have any backup and it's getting cold. But I will say this, in the main, they work really, really hard to keep the power on. And we don't have issues like as you've seen in the news about Texas and other places where power is unregulated. Anyway, one of the things I like about living in Virginia, especially in Central Virginia, if you've got any comments about that or any feelings one way or the other, I'd love to hear from you. So leave a comment below, hit that like and subscribe button, and until next time, thanks for tuning in.